Welcome to the Internet History Podcast. I'm your host, Brian McCullough. Karel Baloun was the first senior software engineer hired at Facebook in 2005, when it was still technically the Facebook. This was after the Excel round of funding, when Facebook truly began to staff up and grow up. Baloun was only at Facebook for a year, from 2005 to 2006, but he can provide us with some absolutely amazing insights about the company at this very early stage. What was Facebook's culture like in 2005? What were the key innovations made then that ultimately let Facebook succeed where others failed? Would Mark Zuckerberg make a good president of the United States? And what became of Pokey, the mascot Facebook once considered launching? We reference a book that Baloun wrote in 2007 called Inside Facebook: Life, Work, and Visions of Greatness. The Amazon link for that book is in the show notes. So please enjoy this truly remarkable conversation with Karel Baloun. Karel Baloun, thanks for coming on the Internet History Podcast.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me.
I want to get a little bit of a background before we jump into Facebook. Looking at your CV, I see that you worked at a GeoWorks, which I'm I'm kind of super interested in because, I mean, you know, Piero Midyar, Tony Fadell, Andy Rubin, a bunch of people did time at GeoWorks, as it were. What did you do at GeoWorks?
I see this is the Internet History Podcast.
It is indeed, sir.
And I did not know that those people are at GeoWorks. I worked with the old Nokia 8000, which was like the first, I guess, semi-smartphone that had a keypad. And we were enabling advertising using a Java servlet and some sort of back-end API. Starbucks was one of the early advertisers.
So this is mobile ads in what year?
Gee, I was there in 95.
Wow, that is super early stuff. Yeah.
I was still on a Spark 5.
Wow.
My workstation was a Spark workstation.
How many years were you at GeoWorks?
About a year, maybe a little more.
So did you? You said you didn't know all those guys were there. Did you cross paths with Piero Midyar at all?
I don't know. I don't know when he was there. Okay. But I do know that I installed Geos OS over my Windows laptop, which was kind of fun.
Right.
Geos OS was an operating system, a fully Windows equivalent operating system.
Well, I've been saying for a long time now I need to do a separate episode about all those pen-based computer companies that were around in the 90s that were just ahead of their time, I suppose. That the next step that for Internet history purposes, you spend 6 years at LookSmart, I guess, starting in the late 90s.
Yeah,
and
it was one of the four people competing with Google over Internet search.
Well, so first of all, you know, I've talked to a lot of Google people, and we've talked about, you know, how when Google enters, there's this whole ecosystem of search engines existing, and so who needs another one? And LookSmart was one of the biggest ones of those. So you're there around like the height of the bubble era, like you know, when LookSmart is
and before it. I was there right when they entered the U.S. because they were an Australian company, and they were partnering with MSN. Which was at that time maybe with AOL, the largest sort of online community, and so they won the like the official online search and directory partner for the Sydney Olympics. Was that 96?
No, that would have been Atlanta. So whatever came, 2000 maybe?
Yeah, I guess it was 2000, and this was sort of in preparation for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like, well, and again, I don't remember what year this would have been, but it was before the bubble burst, maybe 98. Anyway, we were bigger than Google at that time, LookSmart was. And at one of the all hands meetings, an open question for one of the SVPs, it wasn't the CEO. Anyway, the question was, why don't we buy Google? And the answer was, oh, that would dilute us too much. That would be a highly dilutive effort or something.
Well, right,
so it was not clear who was going to win at the time.
And I'm sure at the time that he's saying that, LookSmart stock is probably stratospheric, so who needs to buy this underling? Yeah. So what are you working on at LookSmart generally? I mean, you're there for 6 years. I'm sure it was a bunch of things.
Yeah, so Perl was the big language at the time. Mm-hmm. Perl, for anybody who wants to look it up. But that was an example of a language that failed to evolve. You know, object-oriented programming came, and it became, well, you know, people were trying to convert a lot of Perl spaghetti code into objects, and while you know, a version of that came along that made it possible, it was never attractive, and it was sort of a real expert endeavor to both code and understand such code. So we moved to PHP. I did a skunkworks project at LookSmart that took some. It was actually their articles code. They also had the largest directory of online articles.
That's findarticles.com, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So I took that entire front end and I converted it to PHP, and that was still running like 10 years later. You know, even though LookSmart was, I guess they're still alive, but because I took it to PHP, that enabled me to look credible when I got my Facebook interview.
Right. So
they were on PHP, and there weren't that many people who were doing it.
So it's the PSP expertise. I'm sure it also looked good to them that you're at LookSmart, and so you've been at a big company. But so yeah. to start the story, in April of 2005, I guess you get a LinkedIn message from Matt Kohler.
That's right. Yeah, because I had been networking on LinkedIn just for fun. It was the only sort of social experience available online at the time.
And so he found you. Were you aware of Facebook?
Not at all.
So he brings you in for an interview. What's the interview process like?
No, Kohler did not bring me in for an interview. He vetted me because I mean I guess looking back, I was probably one of the more active PHP coders on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And I had my 500 connections, which was the most they would show. So I guess as far as he could see, you know, I'm LookSmart and I look credible. So he was just screening candidates for Zuckerberg. So he lined me up, and I met Zuckerberg directly at a non-inquiry in Berkeley.
Mm. And I read in your book that you thought at first that you failed the interview with Zuckerberg. Because you go ahead and tell me that story.
Oh, just that, you know, I wasn't confident. I wasn't doing that great. I was, he asked, I think pretty good questions, you know, as far as how would you code this or that. And I felt like I was stammering a little bit. To step back, what made me nervous was, first of all, I'd never done an interview in a restaurant and I didn't have a whiteboard, but, also, I kind of did not know even what Zuckerberg would look like, or I did not know the site that we were talking about. You know,
well,
the day before,
because at that point, you would need an edu email address to get in, right? So you can't really, you can't research it really.
Yeah, I did not have an edu email address, And also, you needed to be at one of the 12 or something that were on the site.
Right.
So Matt Kohler, to help me prepare, gave me like, I don't know if it was his cousin who went to like, to I guess maybe Cornell, and he just sort of gave me the URL for this, and I typed it in so I could get a static view of the profile page of his cousin. I don't even think that was a public page at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you had to sort of, it wasn't well secured, so probably I had to enter the whole URL. I'm not sure. But anyway, I also realized I did not know what Zuckerberg looked like when he was coming to the restaurant. So I was like, is that him? Is that him? You know, I'm 30 something and this 18-year-old, you know, for my interview. And the good thing about the interview, though, was he was very fair and he wanted to, you know, make progress. So he asked me if I wanted another question, and I probably could have gambled and thought maybe I answered good enough and they're, you know, eager to hire anyway. But I just said, yeah, sure, give me another one. And I was excited. I wanted to do better, and that was the right attitude. And I did better on that one, and that got me in.
I was going to say, we assume you did better on the second round.
Yeah.
So you mentioned
I also had a master's in social psych, which I think helped.
Right, because he was at least majoring in psych before he dropped out.
No, I think he was in CS, wasn't he?
He was in both.
I see.
Yeah. People actually don't know that he. Anyway, this is your story.
Yeah.
So okay, you mentioned. So this is April, May 2005. You mentioned that you're mid-30s at this point. So
early 30s.
Early 30s, okay. But that's still what, a decade older than the coworkers you're joining?
Yeah. I mean, he couldn't drink to celebrate his VC funding. Mm-hmm. And I was the only guy with kids at the company.
Right. So if Matt Kohler hires you, that means that this is after the Excel round of funding. So
right after.
Right after. Okay, so are you sort of brought in as like, okay, this is the first round of like, you know, senior professional software engineers?
Yeah. So there was a lot of infrastructure that still needed happening. Like I put in source control. There were we created a deployment process over the first month. Just things that, you know, an accident wouldn't bring the site down.
What's the so this is, what office is this? Is this the one that's on Emerson Street or on University?
This was on Emerson. We were above a Chinese restaurant.
Right. So that's the one with all the graffiti on the walls and things like that.
Yeah.
So what's your impression? Let's say, you know, first day you show up to work. You know, what's the culture like? What do you feel like the organization is like?
Well, I also want to step back and say one other thing. Why did I take this job?
Right.
Because I was working for an 18-year-old, and it felt very unusual. Like, I think a lot of people in my situation would not have taken that jump because it did not appear professional. And there was, you know, I had my own network of people that I sort of talked to about this company, and it was a mixed bag. You know, it wasn't clear that this would become anything. In fact, it wasn't clear even in like 2008 or 9 that they would win big. I believed it, but not most people. But what was really unique about it was the level of excitement and the level of connection and the speed of iteration. So they knew exactly who they were serving, and they had a lot of very rapid ideas for how to do it better. You know, like newsfeed wasn't there yet, but they were very aware of how people were traversing the site and what features being used and what weren't. And we would do deployments, you know, whenever. Like, you know, literally you just push a button and it's on the site. And that was extremely powerful because, you know, one engineer is pushing out code to 1 million users, you know, so, and you could see them like actively using the new code because they were very aware of the metrics and they had internal dashboards already. So it was kind of intoxicating. I gave 2 weeks notice, and I spent every day, every evening in the Look Smart office. I'd go to the day job, then I'd drive down to Palo Alto, and I would stay in the office most of the night because even before I was supposed to start, because it was so exciting. So, the atmosphere was very amateur, but in a good way. Like, not sure what we're doing, but open to learn, and just so super excited to all be here doing this. I'd never been in such an environment.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned things like like code reviews when you start aren't even like they're sort
not
of
code reviews, code deployments.
Okay, but like in your book you say like there's not a lot of meetings. Like I'm getting into this idea that things aren't very professional, but then at the same time you feel empowered because it's almost like if something needs done, okay, let's just do it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of. Do you feel like that was a product of their age and inexperience that it hasn't been beaten into their heads, working 5 years at a different company or something, that this is how you do things, like that was just the freedom of we don't know what we shouldn't be doing?
They got one really good engineer from Oracle because he was working on a product that wasn't going to be released for 2 or 3 years.
Mm.
So no, they had it right. They were working at internet speed, and everybody else was being ineffective.
So you're brought in, like we said, with this first sort of round of we're professionalizing, we're bringing in a bunch of engineers. Like you're hired along with Steve Chen and Scott.
Yeah.
How long is
Marlette.
Steve? How long is Steve there before he leaves to do YouTube?
Not long at all.
So you barely got.
I mean, it was an interesting choice for him. No, I and Zuckerberg and Moskovitz were sitting at one 4-person table, and that was for about a week. And it was really a tough decision for him because he was excited about Facebook as well, but he had this other idea, and I just think it's amazing that right there next to Stanford. Google had been in the same building that Facebook took on university. Just the amount of entrepreneurial energy, right? The idea that you could take an idea like YouTube and make it better than Facebook, which is your other opportunity, right? Which is serving millions of people. Mm-hmm. It's just the audacity of it. Is still overwhelming to me. Still overwhelming to me. I mean, where else? Yeah.
Well, I want to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the system as it exists at this time. So this is still when you go college by college. So each network is localized on a specific campus. I read that also the servers are separated by colleges, right? So that like you do something new, you launch it on the Harvard site, and then you propagate it onto the other servers. Is that how it was structured?
No, I believe just the databases were separated.
Okay.
I think you could put in a hook to launch for a subset of the audience, and they still do that. They still have something called Gatekeeper, which trials out new features on slices of the audience, so they know whether the feature will be more widely used or whether it has bugs. So, but no, it was a single web tier.
And is Wirehog still going on at this point when you join, or was that a project that had already they dropped?
I don't think I'm going to comment on that.
Okay. So let's talk about Dustin Moskovitz a little bit. So he's still basically he's the guru of everything, right? He's still running most of the development at this point.
Did you say Moskowitz?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's a super smart guy, and I think he's also, along with Zuckerberg, a true mensch. You know, both of them really care about people. And, I mean, you look at Moskowitz's Asana project now, right? It's really meant to make a difference in people's work lives, make them more productive, make them enjoy work communications more than email. You know, both of them look at projects which make a tangible difference on people's lives. And he's a smart technical guy, but he was more of a technical operations where he knew every bit of code that had been written, as far as I could tell, because you know, I mean, Zuckerberg was doing all this other stuff and they were doing it together. Everybody was working on everything. So, and the code base was still pretty small. But, you know, to call him a guru at that time, he was learning as we go along. And it was amazing how much he learned, how quickly, as far as internet technology. He wasn't a CS guy. So I'd say he was a brilliant learner. And both him and Zuckerberg were humble about recognizing what they know and don't know, and getting the right people in the room. Like Jeff Rothschild, J-Ro, was an amazing guy early in the company because we were reaching hardware limits very soon, and you know, I could tell when an aspect of the software layer wasn't cooperating, and you know, we tried different versions of PHP. But, you know, what do you do when you just hit the bandwidth limit on the actual physical cable, you know? I'll be saying, no, the software really does have more throughput than this. There's no limit like this. We've tried this configuration. Oh yeah, you just need 3 times as much physical wire, you know, or the write speed on the disk just. You're not, you know, you need a photon array. And we had no idea about these. Or I had, you know, I think operations had always been a distinct thing from software engineering. And, you know, they knew to hire Jeff Rothschild, who just was or is probably still a technical genius as far as understanding how, to the deepest level, things work. And more people like that were coming in who were truly like Scott Marlett, you know, a master's in computer science. And he and Doug Hirsch built the photos feature really, really well, at a level of professionalism that, you know, the rest of the company took on. It was a key initial, like, super high quality project. So, not to take anything away from Dustin, who was super smart, but it was just a different level of professionalism. In fact, above my own level.
Can we go into the photos project briefly? That was, in various accounts, that was a big sort of aha moment, because when you guys add the tagging and then something like within a month, like 3/4 of users have tagged people in photos and things like that. Just tell me what you remember about that project and maybe the uptake and that sort of thing.
Well, it was cleverly designed and iterated. It was always meant to be a social feature, people sharing photos. There wasn't a good way to do that online, but you wanted to send a notification to other people to join Facebook and to look at the photo. So tagging was a natural innovation in that it was a reason to message people, and to you know, growth was always a key priority for Zuckerberg, even now, but always was. So, you know, he would love features that brought people onto the site. And you know, tagging it's Facebook is always about emulating real world behaviors. Like poke was a really lightweight message. It's something you would do. And tagging, it's something you would do. You would show a friend a photo if you could. And it was amazing how rapidly it took off, because it was a real need. But Facebook tried dozens of things every week like that didn't take off. So if you mine enough, you're going to hit gold. And that was the brilliance of the fast prototyping.
Well, and because you guys are always obsessed with watching the user behavior, so you can see in real time, okay, this has gotten uptake, that hasn't, that sort of thing. Like that is the key driver for all of the product decisions?
That and a real respect for the user. Like, people might do things like click on link bait that isn't good for them. So you definitely respond to the true user activity, but you need to understand why they're doing it. Like, they might be doing more clicks just because they're lost. They might be doing rapid clicks because they're trying everything, or they might be using this convoluted flow because they can't find the easier one. So you're just honestly trying to help the users do better. So an example of that, Microsoft is doing a lot better, I think, than they were 10 years ago or under Ballmer. But look what just happened with our attempt to use Skype this morning. I literally spent 45 minutes trying to reactivate my Skype account, merging two different accounts. They got confused because they couldn't tell whether I had once authenticated with Facebook. They made me change both my Skype password and my Microsoft Live password. And then they got confused between the two. I don't know. Was there some delay on the update? Yeah. And I could log into my web Skype, but I couldn't log into my OS client Skype, even after I updated to the newest, native client. So that is, and it all looked nice, but it was a lack of respect for your users. And Facebook, who actually, Zuckerberg rejected calling them users. He now does, community members or, our community. But users was a taboo word because, they're not addicts, they're people. You would use, our community, our people. But a true respect for what makes their lives better. And just to give a current modern counterexample to that, I find the Snap Streaks feature totally abusive. I mean, people love it. They use it all the time. All the kids have lots of streaks with all their friends, and that's why they message them daily, because they don't want to lose the streak, and it's wonderful for Snap's engagement metrics. But I just find that, it's not good for people. They don't have a real conversation. They just send the same snap to 20 people really quickly to get through their streaks. Facebook will never implement a streaks-like feature because they're looking out for the best interests of their community.
Could you talk briefly about Zuckerberg as a manager? And I'm talking about at this time, because remember, your early 30s, he's 19, 20, whatever. What was it like to work with him?
Amazing. Best leader I've ever met. He asked all the right questions. He delegated. He got himself out of coding, even though that's what he loved to do. He had coaching. His speaking was getting better every couple of months, to the team and publicly. You could tell, right? He was becoming sort of a more professional PR person, but at the same time, he was authentic. And anybody who would meet him at this time would feel that he had your best interests in heart. The community felt that, the investors felt that, the employees felt that. And he was. The only reason he IPO'd was to take care of his initial employees and investors.
You said,
I think
In your book, you
The
said
reason the site was popular was because he really listened to and cared for the users. Go ahead.
Well, you said in the book that you felt like Zuckerberg never showed very much self-doubt, that if some idea failed, it really didn't faze him. He'd just plow his energy into the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah, just fail fast.
Mm-hmm.
That was an innovation in engineering. Move fast and break things.
Mm-hmm. This is around the time, 2005 into 2006, that everyone in the world is coming to try to either acquire Facebook or partner with Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you personally ever feel like maybe Mark would do a YouTube? Did you ever feel like it was close to something like that?
So Mark really respected his mentors, people like Graham from the Washington Post, and people like Andreessen and, of course, Peter Thiel. And I think everybody had different perspectives on an acquisition, and he was respectful to hear all of them. He wanted to make the right decision for everybody. There were a couple of things going on. He believed that he would never have as good an idea as Facebook in his life, that this was going to be his life. He knew that very early. So if he sold out, he felt there isn't a bigger idea than this that's available to me, which is a pretty cool thing to recognize. He knew that the people graph was more important than Google's internet graph, because representing real relationships didn't exist. It's very hard. And what's more important, knowing how people interact or how web pages interact? Which is an amazing insight for an 18-year-old, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that was going on was he was being strongly advised to sell. I don't know by who, but that time no young founder had made it. Sergey Brin and Larry Page were older, and they had brought in adult supervision, right? But right now, you look at somebody like Evan Spiegel, and it's credible to him and his investors that he would succeed, even though he really never has before. I think Travis Kalanick also opened up the path for other people this way, right? But for Zuckerberg, it wasn't luck at all. It was a real focus on your users and a real acknowledgement of your limits. Like that idea that Facebook is about connecting the world. Well, it was consistent for 10 years, right? And a lot of things didn't confuse him because he kept on a simple, consistent vision. Like the platform, the big platform launch was all about empowering entrepreneurs and making Facebook as a platform useful to everybody for growth, right, through games. It wasn't making any money, right? The platform itself. It wasn't an obvious move, but like today, Snapchat isn't really succeeding as a platform company, even though that path has been highlighted for them by so many other people. I think Zuckerberg just made tremendously good decisions early and consistently. So he is a unique sort of success talent.
Well,
in Silicon Valley.
Something that people forget about also, and again, in the context of 2005, 2006, MySpace is the big 800-pound gorilla.
That's right.
So what did you guys feel about MySpace as competition at Facebook?
The leadership was always very aware of competition, and the way to beat them is to provide a better product and naturally win over their users by, not excessively advertising, and by having a really fast, snappy site, and by always introducing features like photo tagging, which are cool and innovative. That's why it's always important to change the site. MySpace got stuck for a while, and they stopped being cool well before they stopped working. At the time that he was offered $1 billion by Yahoo, I believe MySpace was about 4 times as big, 80-20, bigger than Facebook. And also at that time, the high school initiative that Facebook kicked off was not doing great. It was underperforming expectations. So I think it was a real ballsy move by him to decline. But I think what he saw was Yahoo is not, I don't know if it was already obvious at the time from prior acquisitions, but there was not a single example of where Yahoo acquired a company and it continued to thrive or got bigger. There was never a YouTube acquired by Google kind of example. And he wasn't going to let anybody kill Facebook, kill this great idea.
So that's interesting that you say that...
it wasn't about greed.
Right.
Also, he wasn't greedy. He could have had, his own fuck you money, but no.
Right.
He was after the idea.
No, I think that's...
And helping people.
I think that's key that you're highlighting his guts there, because especially if you're saying things like, the high school rollout sort of underperformed, and so maybe you should take this deal, Mark. Is there, what I'm getting at is, at the time, how much of a sense was there that, we can roll Facebook beyond colleges? Because if you can't, then maybe it makes sense to take $1 billion deal. But at the time, 2005, 2006, is there a sense, is there a belief, maybe is the better word, that no, everybody will want to use this at some point?
Zuckerberg would rather have tried that and failed multiple times than take $1 billion. Because, you're not going to connect the world if you're just at the colleges. But there was no indication that everybody wanted to be on Facebook or that it would ever become the case. So just how different the internet was back then. I had a Trio in the Facebook office, which was like one of the early camera phones.
Right, Palm.
I never once took a fucking picture of the Facebook office or of my, coworkers. I had a picture phone. I had the Photos website onto which to upload things on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
But I was working on a different project. And it wasn't a natural use case, certainly from my generation.
Right.
And even, the people who were doing photo tagging were innovating. They were taking photos and putting them on the line.
Yeah.
And they were inventing all these reasons why people would want to be on Facebook. And Friendster died because it was didn't perform and it was slow and it had the wrong community. So I think Facebook was always very aware that they needed to be they needed to have a more responsive, more usable website than MySpace, but also that they'd get one chance really to become well known. So they intentionally stayed small until they had a product that was really going to be widely used, and Photos was part of that. But I believe that they also felt that browsing people's profiles at that time, the major site activity was there were various links that led to profiles and then content on those profiles. So there was no news feed. So the only way you could find out what your friends were doing was by visiting their pages. So there were a lot of profile views, which was also where the apps would install. And then you'd click off of something on that person's profile to go to a different profile. That was not really efficient. So I think having a news feed that was interesting was a key part of being able to publicly roll out beyond colleges.
Well, I think you leave before that does roll out. But do you remember that idea sort of percolating, the genesis of
Definitely.
the newsfeed? Yeah.
Because everybody wants a personal newspaper. That is a broad public need.
Right. I've said before that that's almost something that from the very beginning of the web, people have been trying to crack. only things that interest you. Yeah.
So you can't underestimate how difficult a feature that was.
From a
now,
technical
there's feeds
perspective.
everywhere. Technically,
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the great thing about Facebook was, from using the Open Compute project and tons of open source, both give and take with the open source community, Facebook is a super technology company and always has been. MySpace didn't want to create their own ad server. They were going to vendor for everything because they were a media company. But Facebook is a technology company, a communications platform. They're the phone, and they have to work really well. I think if it wasn't for Facebook, we wouldn't have free voice over IP, voice chat and free video chat. And, people have to keep up with Facebook because Facebook will make everything free. But just the difficulty of having video chat all over the world on every single kind of phone is so difficult. And Newsfeed was the first really difficult thing that they did. True innovation.
This is sort of a sideline, but something that I noticed in your book that I hadn't heard anywhere else is there was a discussion at one point about a Facebook mascot called Pokey.
Yeah.
Is there a story behind that? It was a hedgehog?
Yeah. Yeah. So, everybody has their cute little icon or mascot, and Facebook had the Al Pacino face.
Right.
And then later it became just an F. But I think there was some thought of for marketing purposes, being cute. And Matt Kohler really liked Pokey the Hedgehog,
and
which would have been an interesting idea, but Poke was never the key feature of the site.
Right. So they sketched it up and everything, and were considering launching it?
I wasn't in marketing. It was just kind of a funny idea. So I don't know how serious it became.
Well, that would have been interesting if we had Pokey running around these. Yeah.
But it's an interesting story. The relaunch of Poke failed, right? As an actual standalone app on iOS, and they've launched dozens of about a dozen apps that have failed, and they call them learning experiences, and they fold the used parts of the user interaction into their main apps once they've sort of vetted them and vetted the technology, right? So these are alpha attempts. They're basically large-scale use case runs where they're just trying to see if the app is going to work and if the technology is going to hold up. But I think it was kind of sad that Poke didn't make it as a standalone app because it was kind of fun.
So as I mentioned,
I didn't feel that way about the other apps. This one had a history with the company,
Yeah. It's core DNA almost.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned earlier, you were only there for about a year, but then you spent several years after that. After they do open up the API, are you the founder of your next company? You're making Facebook apps, essentially, right?
Yeah. So I had been with large companies for well over 10 years in Silicon Valley, and this was the first time I had ever seen an amazing entrepreneurial, success. And also the platform they were launching was clearly going to be huge. There was never a way before the Facebook platform that you could launch something and have tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people using it in a day or two. And I thought this was going to be huge. So I decided, it was time for me to do my own entrepreneurial thing, which in retrospect was a career limiting move, but was true to what I was feeling at the time. And I think is actually a testament to the effect that Facebook and the app concept had on individual developers. At that time, since it's a history podcast, everything was controlled by big companies. There was no way at that time, individual developers were lucky to launch some Windows application that would possibly be downloaded, but people were still buying actual like DVDs and floppy disks in stores for their apps. The idea of a download and then update through downloads and get paid through some electronic medium. PayPal hadn't been invented, right? Or was just about being invented.
Yeah.
How would you even collect money for an online app? Actually, PayPal was already pretty widely distributed at that time. But
still, it's the paradigm shift from a shrink-wrapped box, that you buy at a store to a platform where people just get it.
Yeah, and that an individual developer or a team of 3 or 4 people could create a whole app and sell it. Stunning.
And we should point out that Facebook is laying that groundwork slightly before even the App Store on iOS launches.
Yes, they are enabling it. The whole app idea on iOS was from this Facebook platform idea that an app could be very lightweight. It's an app, not an application.
Not a program, yeah.
Yeah. Well, before then, you'd have Windows applications. Mm-hmm. They were never called apps.
Right.
But this lightweight thing was also like a sort of concept innovation by Facebook. How robust a platform could you make that a developer would be able to launch an app in a day or two? I launched my first Facebook app overnight. Mm-hmm. It was called I Am Green, and I was watching the user count. I had tens of thousands of people joining immediately. I was like, this is impossible.
Well, right.
A couple months later, I had VC funding.
Right, because the one side of it is it's a platform that's easy to develop, but the key component is you have the access to that scale instantaneously.
Yes. Unheard of. What else would you do? Email users one by one?
Right.
It was unheard of, which is great for the internet.
So a few quick questions to wrap up with here. It's often difficult, but I ask people to put themselves back in the mindset of the time period we're talking about. If I had told you in 2006 that Facebook would have 2 billion users and my grandmother would be on Facebook, would you have believed me?
In 2006, right around the time I was leaving Facebook.
Exactly.
They had not launched public yet. The highest estimates for the eventual value of the company that even like the most bullish people were making was $100 billion, which was, I want to say, like maybe half of what Google was worth then. At that time, I think General Electric was the most valuable company, around $400 billion. So these were impossible numbers. The thing that you see with internet stocks right now, Facebook, Amazon, even Netflix, was in no way foreshadowed or inevitable. It was only because so much value has been created for users over the last 10 years. So would I have imagined that they'd have 2 billion people? Zuckerberg knew all along that he's connecting the world. From 2006. He was going to find a way to get everybody connected. This was going to be the phone. Phones are terrible, aren't they? Like, I still can't figure out how to get people to stop spamming my cell phone. And voicemail, finally they put in text translation. The transcription on iOS. It's still not very good.
Right.
But what is this phone thing that's in my smartphone? Right? I mean, Facebook Messenger is so much better, and so is FaceTime, which was really a preemption or even a response to what Facebook was certainly doing. Apple has to have an ecosystem that's better than Facebook, otherwise they get WeChatted. Where Apple is now no longer the best smartphone in China because the App Store doesn't matter. Everybody using WeChat for everything. They can't have that happen with Facebook, which is why they supported Twitter early. which is why they limit Facebook's ability to integrate with iOS strategically. So Zuckerberg knew he was connecting everybody, but it was not obviously clear that the platforms would let him, or that people would want to use Facebook, or that he could continue to adapt. Like at one time it was all pages, another time it was all news stories around the election time, right? But he always comes back to this idea of real friend interaction. And now he's layering on groups. And you see there's a lot of core group promotion happening. So what's amazing is how well he adapts to what his users need and keeps the site fresh and interesting so more people want to join. The other great thing he does is segment his user base. So when Google Plus launched, everything I got was spam invitations from India.
Mm-hmm.
I still get some of that in Facebook, but it's not intrusive. It's properly positioned to my interest level. If it's somebody who I have 20 mutual friends with, it'll come up, but it doesn't interfere with my day-to-day. And Facebook is constantly putting new things into my feed that might be interesting to me. That's how events will come in, slowly, right?
Yeah.
I'll find a few good events from me. I'll be like, hey, this events thing, I wonder if there are any other events I should discover. And they're doing it with local places, right? Now I get a notification when my friend does a review of something that's really positive around me. So they're super smart with figuring out how they can really add value to people. And I believe that they will get progressively everybody. And then there's the question of whether they will be a monopoly. I have some friends who have very strong opinions that Facebook should be sort of an open graph, that something like Diaspora should take off, but it never will. Is it dangerous that Facebook is the only owner of the social graph? Not as long as Zuckerberg's in charge. And, looking down 20 years later, I think it's still very possible that another big company will come and compete with them. I think it's an unsustainable. It's not a monopoly that you can sustain the same way Microsoft did on devices, or that Apple could have become if Android hadn't launched. Facebook only stays relevant, just like MySpace only stayed relevant, if they continue to serve their users well. Which is why you get so much free stuff in Messenger and WhatsApp, right?
Yeah.
They recognize they have to remain very, very valuable to users for them to stick around.
Well, you made me think of almost the inverse question, though. From today's perspective, when you see Mark Zuckerberg, now this titan of industry,
Yeah.
Do you still recognize the 20-year-old from 2005?
I'd say he's the most humble titan of industry I've ever seen, and one who plans to give away 99% of his wealth. Mm-hmm. To everybody who's using Facebook, they're actually creating a huge bucket of money that's going to go to curing all diseases, right? And the one thing that's never changed about him is his love for people, and that a human being's value on this planet depends on how much they serve, and he's so grateful he can serve his community and do this together with them. The part that's changed is he's learned how to do that better. Larry Page was never an effective spokesperson for Google Plus, but very slowly, through his 50-state tour, Mark Zuckerberg is becoming an asset, the public face of Facebook. And that is almost unthinkable 20 years ago when he was very shy. He was really a geek, a real technologist, Mm-hmm. But he realized that he's the best person to do this, that he's an authentic voice, and especially millennials know bullshit from authenticity. Mm-hmm. So you can tell I really want him to do well because I respect his values.
Do you want him as president of the United States?
He'd be an amazing president, because he'd really be looking at his new constituency. Obama said that he was always a president for all Americans, And he tried. He tried to do what was best for the majority of Americans. And he was really trapped by the limits of his own power. And I think Zuckerberg would face the same frustration. Being CEO of Facebook arguably has as much influence, I think, as being the not the whole government of the United States,
right,
but just the presidency. I think it's pretty circumscribed in what you can do. So I'm not sure Zuckerberg wants the job. I think he'd be a great asset for the company or for the country with his values. But I think he's going to be busy for at least another 10 years because we got virtual reality coming where he's making a real play to own the platform. He's only halfway done connecting the world, and he's not into China yet, which is really important for him, I think, because, you look at Taiwan and you look at China. I'm not an expert, but I think Taiwan's a pretty open country. And you look at what's happening with Hong Kong and slowly that they're losing that. I think I do very much respect what the Chinese government has done economically and scientifically. The current leadership generation is all very engineering heavy, effective technocracy. But I think Zuckerberg would like to see them more open and people being able to express themselves and freely associate without being worried. And I think you could get WhatsApp blocked in China, the end-to-end encryption. Yeah. It's a shame. Yeah. I think the world needs to be, and you look at a place like Pakistan where I have some friends, but they are unable to say anything remotely critical of Islam on their Facebook because they know that saying anything bad about Muhammad is a capital offense, and you have hundreds of people on death row because of it. So it's just sad when people can't express themselves freely, and I hope Facebook empowers people to do that.
So I like to, as a final question, ask people either what they're working on today. Feel free to plug a company or a product or something, or even if not that, what excites you today? Like what's the new thing that you're interested in?
The great thing about technology is how it helps leverage individual aspirations. Zuckerberg was able to build Facebook because he had all this open source software around as well as cheap hardware. And Facebook gets more powerful because we all have a supercomputer in our pocket. So I believe that technology is a good thing as far as helping entrepreneurs do more with the very precious lives, the one chance we've been given here, right? And especially here in California, any dream is possible. So I'm trying to look at different startups that I could participate in or advise or, build myself, because that's a bug that never gets old. It was very painful for me about 5 years running my own startup and pivoting many times and in the end closing it. It was a very humbling and difficult experience, but I am confident, just like everybody else here, that could happen again with a more positive result. I think I regret that I never looked enough at my users the same way Zuckerberg does and really tried to serve. So I hope next time I will. I think education is a real opportunity in America. I think this Chan Zuckerberg initiative is doing personalized learning plans for people to let students go at their own pace through the standard curriculum. I think that there's things like nextlesson.org, which lets students get really excited about, say, the math or reading lessons they have by introducing real-world content into the math lesson. So, you'll be taking a certain math part of the curriculum and doing baseball statistics against it, or pretending that you have your own app launched and these are the metrics, and you have to calculate it based on the math lesson that you're working on. So I think kids could get just so much more excited about their own real world potential. You have teenagers doing TED Talks. You have people who win the Intel science competition having invented real products that change the world. There's one guy who invented a new form of carbon capture, got accepted into an Ivy League school, deferred for a year to go work on that in Texas with some engineers.
I read about that.
So just the ability of anybody to, especially young people, to learn more and more quickly and immediately apply it to real world problems that are becoming more approachable every day. I'm so excited about that. Now, my personal part in that is I'm kind of middle aged now, so I'm taking various online classes and staying current on platforms and languages, looking for a way that I could be helpful to the world or to a team. But I think I'm hopeful that people my age can still be a part of this. I'm amazed at what young people can do with their energy and their speed. But at the end, I also see that I have things I could offer to a team or to a world problem. And I hope that people my age who might be listening to this also feel that we can leverage ourselves and that we can still make a difference, because we really understand, I think, more what the world needs, and we're less likely to fall for a fad. We're more likely to have a balanced perspective on, what really could make a difference versus just seem like it could. So, hey, I'm pretty good at identifying fake news.
Well, listen, part of what you're talking about, contributing is contributing the lessons learned from the recent past. So I want to thank you, Karel, for coming on the show and doing that today, remembering all that for us.
Brian, I really want to thank you for capturing internet history while it's still possible, and I think what you're doing is really important.
Oh, well, thank you, and good luck with whatever's next.
Thanks, Brian.
If this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, please subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice. There's plenty more great internet history where that came from. And if you're a longtime listener, then you know what to do to help us out. Rate and review us on iTunes. Because iTunes gives credit to reviews and ratings, and the more great reviews we get, the more people will discover us. As always, there's more info on our website, www.internethistorypodcast.com. The show's Twitter handle is @NetHistoryPod, and my personal Twitter is @BrianMCC. Thanks for listening.